So the mind could change the water pH by 1 unit. But again, what is the force that could trigger these changes? This influence of intentions and emotions is not only limited to the domain of water, water crystals or DNA, but it seems to be able to affect everything. And the reason for this might be the fact that the mind affects what is happening in the subatomic quantum world, similarly as in the already mentioned double slit experiment. The following study from Peer Lab that I'm going to show you clearly demonstrated that mind could statistically influence generation of random numbers.
The Princeton Peer Lab experiments have also shown that people's minds have the ability to affect things at a distance. They take a device called a random event generator, which makes a sequence of random ones and zeros or yeses and nos based on a quantum circuit. What they have shown is that the mind can affect how that object behaves, what the stream of ones and zeros looks like. And it does not depend how far away you are from the person influencing the experiment. Even thousands of miles away, a person is able to affect the results just as well. So we have an ability to exert a force on distant objects that does not fall into any of the known category of forces. This new force goes through barriers that would normally stop the known forces. It even acts backwards in time in certain types of experiments. This new force, the Russians have called torsion. It's known by a variety of different names. It may be the same thing as what the Chinese call qi, the essence of Chinese medicine. It appears to affect space and time, and by doing so it affects all the other forces, and it really calls for a new re-examination of physics.
So as he said, we need to re-examine all the laws of physics that are currently so deeply rooted in orthodox science. Are we rediscovering a force that has been known to ancient cultures like the Egyptians, Chinese, Tibetans or Native Americans for thousands of years? Could they be able to access this information through the power of their mind that was shown to have such a strong influence on our reality? Could they have access to this information through their subjective apparatus called the mind, instead of conducting scientific experiments? One of the most respected quantum mechanics, David Bohm, once said, "In some sense, man is a microcosm of the universe. Therefore, what man is a clue to the universe." Perhaps each of us has already got everything that is needed to understand this reality and its illusionary appearance. Perhaps all we need to do is to get to know ourselves, not only superficially, but in great depth, to master our minds through understanding the effect of emotions and thoughts on our bodies, as well as on our everyday reality. This study focuses on the effects of sending healing intentions over long distances.
I'm currently a professor of psychology, medicine, neurology, psychiatry, and surgery at the University of Arizona, where I direct a laboratory for advances in consciousness and health. And I direct a team of people doing research that essentially integrates body, mind, and spirit. We've been doing long-distance experiments where, for example, a group of 400 people in England will, together as a group for 10 minutes, send an intention to a leaf in Tucson in my laboratory to glow. And we'll have two leaves. We'll call them leaf A and B. Each leaf has been injured. It's been, little holes have been placed in it, 16 of them in a 4x4 grid, because when you injure a leaf, it actually glows more, because when there's injury, there's actually the healing response involves energy. And then what we do is we have two video cameras, cam recorders, picking up the images of each of the leaves, and then sending by the internet to England. Now, someone in the audience flips a coin, and it comes out randomly heads or tails, and let's say they pick leaf B. At this point, the image from Tucson being sent to London of leaf B is now on the screen. And now 400 people can simultaneously send glowing intentions to the leaf that they see. Meanwhile, my research assistant in Tucson, Mark, he's blind to which leaf has been selected. Okay? After the 10 minutes, Mark is then asked to take the leaves and put them into the biophoton imaging system so we can collect these long exposure images of the leaves, and then they're blindly scored before we break the code to find out what happens. And much to my absolute amazement, sure enough, if leaf B was selected from a distant group and they could actually see the leaf, they're able to affect the glowing of that leaf compared to a match control.
And we can repeat these experiments 100 times and we will still get the same results. We would always find that a group of those people would influence the healing response of the leaf over any distance. And as suggested by the quantum entanglement, the geographical separateness doesn't mean that things are not connected and cannot have influence on one another. Two apparently separated objects are still allowed to be non-locally connected, and therefore, when one changes, so does the other. These first 8 experiments showed that our emotions influence matter, whether it is DNA, molecular structure of water and its pH value, healing recovery, or the generation of random numbers. The commonly shared result throughout most experiments is that these intentions and emotions not only have an influence on matter, but also this effect happens instantaneously. It has been discovered that we have a system within our bodies that is able to scan for future events and respond to them even before the brain.
Interesting studies that was done here at the Institute of Art Math with our chief researcher, Dr. Roland McCready, was a study on intuition, on the intuitive response. And in that study, they had test subjects that were placed in front of a computer, and they were wired up. They were looking at brain waves, they were looking at galvanic skin response, they were looking at readings from the heart rate variability analysis, and things like that. The test subject would push a button and there would be a delay before the picture would appear on the screen of the computer. And the computer was randomly selecting the pictures. No one could know what the computer was going to select. Some of the pictures were pleasant and some were horrific. What we found was that in many cases the body started responding to the upcoming picture, responding in the way it would normally to the upcoming picture, about 6 seconds prior to the picture actually showing up on the screen. 6 seconds prior, the body began to do what it would do if the picture was there. It was a very, very complicated study, a very detailed study, published in 2 parts in the Journal of Complementary and Alternative Medicine. The data analysis showed something very, very interesting. It showed that when that response began, that the first part of our physiology that was doing sort of the intuitive or pre-cognitive response was actually the heart. The heart was responding before the brain. It began to go through a deceleration process that would be compatible with the picture that was going to come up. About 1.5 seconds later, the brain began to do what it does in regards to that picture. But within the human system, at the physiological level, measuring that intuitive response to an upcoming event, it was the heart that responded first. And as I read the summary of that study, I found it fascinating, because what the summary basically said was that it appears as if an upcoming event is significant or emotional, that we have a tendency to be able to sense that or to respond to it before it actually occurs.
I'm going to finish this section with the last experiments by Bruce Lipton that are directly relevant for us, our health and happiness. How could all this information help us to be fully happy and healthy beings? And what are the implications of all of these experiments for us as human beings? Bruce Lipton showed through his experimental findings that we are not controlled by our genes like many people still think. We have the control over our genes and we are not their victims. He would remove a nucleus containing genes from a cell, and this cell would still be able to remain equally intelligent. The cell would later die because of its inability to appropriately respond to new environmental stimuli. This is not because the cell lost intelligence, but because it cannot produce new proteins that would help the cell to respond appropriately. This implies that the cell's intelligence is not stored in its genes. Bruce found out that it is the membrane that is the main processor of a cell. Metaphorically speaking, its brain.